Hello and welcome to the Addicts Anonymous podcast. I'm your host, Jim R. Today's episode 170, and we're going to be interviewing Joseph. How you doing, Joseph?
Man, I'm doing good, brother. How are you? 170. That's awesome, bro.
Yeah, thank you very much. Do you go by Joseph, Joey, Joe?
Joseph is good. When I was an
Joseph is
addict, I
good.
was Joe. So now I'm Joseph.
Okay, so you have different personalities. You know what that just reminded me of? You know Johnny Cash?
Yeah.
His wife would call his alter ego Cash. She goes, I don't like this Cash guy. Because she would call him John, not Johnny.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
That
was
sounds like me.
when he was sober, he was John. When he was not sober, he was Johnny Cash.
I like that. Yeah. I can relate for sure. I can relate.
That guy was crazy. He would take, because I've read a lot about him. I love Johnny Cash. He
Hmm.
would take upwards of 100 pills a day. Say like 60 or 70 uppers, then like 30 downers, and then drink to come down.
Wow.
So he was
Yeah.
crazy. One quick story is I think it'll be funny for our listeners. Fun fact: Johnny Cash is the only person to ever be sued for burning down a national forest. He got into a car accident or something like that. He started some type of fire in the forest,
Yeah.
and he was really high and drunk. So a judge actually sued him, and they got money from Johnny Cash.
Wow.
Yeah, he was the only person to ever get sued for burning down a national forest.
That's nuts. Yeah. That's a good fact right there.
But yeah, let's talk about you for a little bit. Tell me about your childhood and growing up.
Yeah, man. If you looked on the outside, my childhood seemed kind of like it was normal. I come from a middle American family. My mom and dad were born in Iraq. So I'm a second generation, what we call Chaldean. So we grew up in a very strict culture, family oriented, work hard, raise a family. And I grew up in Detroit and I played sports. I was, as you would call, I guess you can call it a popular kid. I knew a lot of people. I played like varsity sports, so I knew older people. So I just had a bunch of friends. I was around so many people and I loved it. Even now, I love being around people. And then at the age of 14, my dad wanted to get us out of Detroit and bring us to where we live now, which is in Florida. So my childhood before that, when you look at it, seemed normal. Now, as I reflected through my recovery, like I remember at 13, like I would drink over the weekends and I just thought like, it's no big deal. Like I'm just hanging out with my cousins and we're just having some drinks. Like when I look back, like I was always the one who was like, let's keep going, let's keep going. And they're like, hey, relax. Like you're passing out and you're waking up trying to drink more. Just relax. And I didn't really think it was a problem. I just thought I was a young kid having fun.
What was the
Um,
first age you ever took a drink or drugs?
so the first drink that I ever took, I was 12 years old. I,
Jesus.
yeah, I actually remember it too. All my cousins were gathering together, and they caught me like trying to drink, and they were like, "If you're gonna drink, just drink. Stop trying to hide it." And growing up in my culture, they were like okay with drinking. They would just always stay like, "Don't smoke weed, stay away from drugs." So like, I never actually entertained drugs until I moved to Florida because all my cousins that I looked up to and I admired, they would let me drink with them, but they would always say, "Don't touch drugs, just drink."
So drinking is big in the Iraqi culture.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's big. Even when I
I
go
never
there
thought
now,
about that. I never, for some reason, I thought it would be the opposite.
I mean,
In
right.
Iraq, are you Muslim? What is like the main religion there?
Yeah, so we're called Chaldean. So there's only
Chaldeans.
3%. Yeah, Chaldeans are Christian Iraqis. So they're not Muslim, they're Christians. They grew up in like a small little village in Iraq. Now there's none of them there, but they're Christian Iraqis. So I grew up actually in a Catholic church. And I grew up, but I just went to church, didn't really have a relationship with a higher power. But even now, when I go back to Michigan, they still drink and they still like find it weird. Like they all know I don't drink. And I went there last Christmas. We're like, so wait a second. And they've probably said this to me like 10 times. Like, so you're still not drinking nothing? I'm like, no. And then they automatically go into like, well, I don't drink because of that. They defend their own drinking. And
Yeah.
I said, hey, I'm not putting that on you. I put it down because it burns me every time. That's what I always say. So that's how I grew up. And one traumatic thing that happened, going to the childhood that I never realized the effect that it had on me was I was molested from the age of 6 to 8 years old. And what's crazy is I never thought it affected me. The one thing it did do for me though, was it when it happened, and I remember when the individual got caught, everything happened. I thought like people were gonna come to me and start talking to me about it, like we were gonna have like I was never like no one ever talked to me about it, and I just kind of brushed it aside. Like I don't think people ask me, do you think that's why you got high? That's not why. But what it did for me that I realized is it taught me how to hide behind what's really going on because
Who
I
was it
actually
that molested you?
it was a close family member, like not like it was like a cousin like I want to say kind of long distance cousin, but it was a cousin that when we would go there, it would happen, and it was from the age of 6 to 8, like almost 2 years, And then he got in trouble for it, and everything was pursued, everything happened, but nobody ever talked to me about it. And even till this day, like my dad never talked to me about it. And it's really because in our culture, we don't talk about those things. Like even today, like when I got out of prison and I started posting and talking about it, my family was like, why are you doing that? Why are you telling everybody what you went through? Like, this is nobody's business. Hide behind your stuff. It's they want you to hide the inside so the outside looks better. So they believe if you make the outside look really good, then you'll be fine. Like that's all that matters is your perception of how people see you, not how you see yourself. And that's what I struggled with, man, especially moving to Florida. Like when I moved here, I'm from the north and I moved down south, completely different. I don't know half of the things these guys do. I'm not connecting with nobody. And I start to go through what I call a depression. Now, like I just told you, I didn't know how to even talk about that stuff. So I just was like, hey, how do I deal with this? And somebody started smoking pot and he was like, hey, you want to smoke weed? And the first time I smoked weed, I was like, great, this is great. I don't feel anything. And then it turned to opiates. And then I did opiates every single day from the age of 14 to the age of 26. And I went to
So
prison twice
did
and
you
still
progress
used.
quickly
Oh,
from like,
yeah, it was quick. As soon as I took opiates for the first time, I was 15 years old. I remember like audibly telling the individual I got the opiates from, bro, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And that's all I focused on. I had a little bit of money saved up. So every time I didn't have any, I made sure I got more. When I ran out of money, to me, it seemed reasonable to take money from people because I needed to get opiates. I didn't care if I had to steal, how I had to get it. But that's what I would do. I would steal from jobs that I worked at, girls that I dated, family members, just to get money, because I needed that feeling. I needed the feeling that the drug did for me. I like the effects produced by it, as they say in the book. Like, that's what I did it for. But the reality is the drugs didn't become the problem. I just was running from myself. I constantly was always running from me, and the drugs provided that relief temporarily until it was gone and you had to keep going.
yeah. Who was the first person that gave you a painkiller?
So I remember by name, I won't say his name, but it was a guy actually from New York. I was working at a pizza shop. And when I worked at this pizza shop, I was just kind of smoking weed. And he would work all the time. Now I had a resentment towards my father. So like I was so angry for being in Florida. I didn't even want to be home. I just want to be away from the house. So when I got this job, like I would just stay there. Even days I did, like they were like, hey, you're not working tonight. I'm like, fine, I'll just stay and help off the clock because I just didn't want to go home. Well, this guy would like work all hours and I would just watch him like zooming by, man. He's never tired. I'm always tired. I'm like, and then I asked him, I said, why are you always moving quickly? And he showed me opiates. And he said, I take these. And I was like, bro, let me get, like, it was without a doubt. I was like, I want one. And he's like, I don't know, man. You're young, not. And if anybody knows me, what I want, I'm going to get it. And I told him, I said, look, if I'm not going to get it from you, I'm going to find out a way to get one. So you might as well let me get one from you besides me going to some stranger. So he
Isn't it
gave me one.
amazing how us addicts we're so good at getting what we want?
Oh, man.
We're such manipulators.
Bro, I said this the other day, actually at a meeting, and we were talking about like doing what we got to do to stay sober. And I said, you know what's crazy? If you're anything like me, when I needed drugs, if you know the lengths that I went to go get drugs and find them, I could tell you stories. You'd be like, holy cow, you're committed to getting drugs. And why did I do that? Because I liked the feelings that the drugs did for me. I believed that it would relieve me from this. And then we come into the program and we think we can't. Why are we not taking that same mentality as we did with drugs? I mean, you know how committed I was to getting drugs, but then when I came into the program of recovery, I was not that committed to staying sober. And the reason why was because I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that I deserved it. I didn't believe that it would work. And the first time in my life when I said, you know what, I believe this will work, I chased
Why,
that just like I chased drugs.
why do you think you didn't deserve it?
Well, because I compared myself to everybody else. I was a victim all the time. I remember the first time I went to treatment, I came into the rooms and all these people talked about how great their life is. And this is the things that I did. And all I thought, because I'm so selfish and self-centered, especially coming to the rooms, I created a lot of damage in my recovery, in my addiction. I hurt a lot of people. I've been to prison. I was molested. These are things that I keep telling myself every single day. It's the story that I told myself about me. So when I walk into the rooms and you guys are talking about all these things that can help people, I'm like, it sounds great, but you don't know what I've done. You don't know who I am. You don't know what I've been through, which if anybody's in the program, is the exact opposite. So when they would tell me to do these things, I didn't believe it would work for me, because I would always say, I'm like, that worked for you, but you don't understand me. Like, you don't know who I am. You don't know what I've been through. I got family members who won't even let me inside their house, and you're asking me to talk to a God of my understanding. Like, I don't even want to do that, because why would God want to talk to me? Do you know how, like, I was the worst person? There's not an individual that I met in my addiction. And I mean this, like, there's not one that said, I'm glad I met this guy, because I created damage in every person's life that I hit. So I didn't believe that there was grace, there was forgiveness, I could change my story. I just continued telling myself, this is who I am. And I thought my past was who I was. Thankfully today I've learned the past is just things that I've done. And my story, when I came to the room, had a comma on it, not a period. I always thought it was a period, like this is the end of my book. But I was just on chapter 4. I could still write another 15 chapters if I wanted to. And it was up to me what those chapters look like. I just didn't think there was more chapters in my life.
That's a good one. That it ends with a comma, not a period. That's a
Yeah.
good one. I like what that represents.
Yeah, it really does. Cause the journey could have started whenever I decided it would start, but I kept putting a period where a comma was placed, so I just, when you're playing that victim card and you're looking at your past and your mistakes, you get in this place that you just think, I'm not worthy of anything you guys are talking about. I just don't deserve it, because I've been talking about all the stuff that happened to me and who I am and who I was, until I realized, like, you know what, that wasn't even me. I was just sick. I don't even know who I am yet. Let me go on this journey to discover who I am. You know what I mean?
And I know part of me, before I got help, I was just like, well, I'm different from all you guys. I'm not the same. There's a reason I do this and a reason I do that. I'm just different. I'm not, my big thing was I wasn't like other addicts. And I think we all think that. We all like, no, 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 I'm different.
Yeah. And another thing too, bro, was like, when I came into the rooms, I never, like, I always think about a new way of life. Like, that's what it is. And I would come into the rooms and just like, I want to get sober. Like, okay, I knew I had a problem. I keep getting high. I don't know how to put it down. I can't do it on my own. And you guys are talking about there's a way. And then I would come in and I would get like 2 weeks under my belt, 3 weeks under my belt. And I'm like, okay, I figured it out. I did 2-3 weeks getting sober, and now I figured it out. But it's a new way of life. Like, that's what the program recovery is to me, is I have to change the way I think. I have to change the way I react. I have to self-reflect all the time. I never looked at the program like that. I only walked in because I didn't have nowhere else to go. I was like, I get it. Drugs and alcohol are my problem. And you guys are talking about like serenity prayers and steps and doing all this stuff that I'm like, what does this have to do with me using drugs? I just want you guys to show me how to stop using drugs. And then when we go in this deep dive of self-reflection, you got to remember, I'm running from me my whole life. And now people are asking me to look at me. But the difference was, look at yourself without judging yourself. Look at yourself not alone. Understand that we have been there. This is not who you are. All these things that I never understood. I was running from me, and now I got to come into and that's the hard part for people. You've been running from your drugs and alcohol. If you're out there using, or you have an addiction, or you've been through it, drugs and alcohol are not the problem. They were a solution to our problem. And today, now, when you come into a program of recovery, what you're actually asking to do is, it's like taking out the trash. I don't know about you, but like, I hate taking out the trash. So when the trash is full, instead of taking it out, the first thing I do is I push it down. I'm like, all right,
Me too.
let me
I was
push the
doing that
trash.
last night.
Yeah, I probably did it this morning. Let me push the trash down. Well, what happens now? You put more trash in it, and eventually you can't keep pushing down. And then what happens after that? If you don't take the trash out and remove it and put a new trash bag in, eventually either you're going to leave the trash there, it's going to stink, or you're going to keep putting more trash in there and it overflows and it starts going down. Well, imagine that's the stuff that you've done in your past. Imagine that's your life. If you don't deal with it, it's going to overflow. And where does it overflow? In every area of your life. It overflows in your heart, so you can't give love, in your family, in your community, in your mind, in your sleep. So what the recovery asks people to do is, let's just take the trash out. Let's look at the trash. It's trash. It is what it is. We can remove it, throw it away. It's going to be gone. And let's put a new bag in there. And every time that people start throwing trash in there, we're going to start realizing we don't want this trash bag to fill up. And that's a hard thing sometimes. But it's what's necessary. And when you look back, I mean, obviously you've been in it, man. 5 years sober right now. I look back at taking the trash out and oh my gosh, dude, like when I think of how it wasn't that hard to look at yourself when you realize like, oh, wait a second, those are just things I've done. And if I look at that and I actually look at the things I've done, why did I do them? What was my part? I can make sure I never do that again. And that's the beautiful part. It's like, hey, you can't change the past, but let's look at it so we can make sure you never do that stuff again. We can make sure you never react that way to people. And that's where the comma comes in. That's where writing new chapters of your life come in. And I'm grateful for the rooms for that, man.
Yeah. Taking a step back, you started pretty young with the drug and alcohol abuse.
Mm-hmm.
How was school for you? Did you do good in school, and how was your social life also?
Well, when I was in Florida, I hated school. I dropped out in ninth grade. I never went back.
Okay.
My life was lit like, again, going back to the victim, I hated school because I looked at all the reasons why I didn't like it. You know, I hated school because they wanted me to study something that I didn't care about. I hated school because I had to get around people that I didn't relate. I had no friends. I had to watch everybody else hang out and go party and go do stuff. And I only had a couple friends. I'm so used to being around so many people that when I came here, it was like a culture shock for me because nobody knows who I am now. And my identity was always in what everybody thought of me. You know, when I was younger, I was like, hey, let's call Joseph, see where we're going. And I'm not to brag about myself. I just knew a lot of people. I grew up there. I had big family who they knew people. So we just had so many friends. So when I went to school and they started telling me to do things, I was so rebellious that like only reason I went to school in the beginning was because of sports. I played basketball. That was the only reason I ever showed up to class and tried not to fail. But I don't know. You probably know who Tim Tebow is, right?
Yeah, football player, right?
That's right. So he went to the same high school that I went to, but he was homeschooled. So what happened for me when I was in eighth grade was I went to the same school Tebow went to, and I went there only for the basketball program. But because I didn't live in that county, I was just using a different address because I wanted to go to that school. Well, I mean, we don't know exactly what happened with Tim Tebow, but let's just say that he didn't really live in the same county that he was going to school, and he just wanted to play football at Nice High School where I went. Well, they did a big investigation when that happened. And if you look it up, you can see the whole Tim Tebow thing in high school was he actually had to move and live in St. Johns County. Well, my dad was like, I'm not going to move and live there. You know, you're just going to switch schools. Well, when I switch schools, I go to a different school, and now they're like, hey, basketball season's already started. Long story short, you pretty much can't play. But once you told me I can't play basketball, why am I going to school? So it's funny. I didn't go to school for 6 months, and my dad was always working. He never knew. Like, he never knew that I was. Back then they would like call the house phone, you know, and then
Yeah.
I would erase the house phone number. So my dad would never know that I'm not showing up to school until somebody came to our house and said, hey, you know, he hasn't came to school in 6 months. And I remember looking at my dad and them. I'm like, well, I'm not going anyways. Like, you guys can force me. Like, you're going to expel me. Great. I don't have to go to school now. That's awesome. And I dropped out. I didn't go. My dad required me to. What's crazy in state of Florida is you can go to like, it's called First Coast Technical College. And actually, like, even if you're not 18, like I was at the time, 15, 16 years old, you can go there and take a class for 6 months and not take your GED, but actually get your high school diploma. Which it blows my mind because I'm like, why don't people just do that? But so I did that. I went there just to get my high school diploma. And once I did that, you know, I would lie and tell my dad I'm going to go to college and do this stuff. But, you know, so I dropped out in ninth grade. I was always problematic, you know. So that's for schooling. That's all I did, man. I went for basketball. And once you took that away, I dropped out in ninth grade.
So tell us how your drug use progressed. Because you said the opiates were the big thing for you, right? That was your main
Yeah.
drug of choice.
Yeah. The opiates were huge, man. So there was a big like epidemic that was happening in Florida, and they
Yeah,
call it,
Florida's huge.
yeah, they called it the pill mill. And during that time, it was so easy to get opiates. I mean, it was like the easiest thing. You could walk into a doctor's office and just say, I need them, my back hurt, and they give it to you. You pay them money and they prescribe it to you. So I was doing that. I was probably taking around maybe 400 to 600 milligrams of oxycodone a day, which is about like a $300 to $400 habit a day. And the more I had, the more I took. Like, I remember I would say, okay, this is good for like 2 days. This will get me through 2 days. And all I would think, and what's crazy is how crazy my mind was, man. All I ever thought about was like, even, I don't care if I had 100 pills. all I knew was I would calculate when I'm going to run out. And I'm like, I know I'm going to run out on this day, which means I got to get money now to be prepared so I don't get sick, because I would get, I mean, the sickness coming off of opiates. I never injected because I was so scared of needles. It's the only reason I don't have tattoos, because I'm still afraid of needles. You can call it soft. Like, I can watch when I get my blood drawn, I almost pass out. Like, that's just what happens. So it was a bad, I mean, like I said, 400 hours a day. There's no job that could actually like sustain that habit. So I would start stealing from parents, family members, pawning stuff, car hopping. I would go out at night, and if you left your car unlocked, I found it. Like, and this is literally what I would think. This is a gift to me. That's great. I'm so glad you did that. I didn't really care who I was hurting. I didn't care the lives that I was destroying. I didn't care the people who had to wake up to a damaged vehicle because I had to take their money. I just cared about what I wanted. And eventually that led me to prison. I got arrested when I was 18 years old. And it was mainly for just pawning stuff. I would go to the pawn shop with my ID, fingerprint, everything, not caring. And eventually I got arrested for, it was 12 different felonies, for dealing in stolen property, false verification ownership. When you pawn something in Florida, you get 4 felonies for each item that you pawn. Plus I had a burglary that I got caught in. I broke into somebody that I knew, like it was actually like a close friends of the family, broke into their home. I cut myself. And when I was arrested, they brought up 4 new charges for burglary. So here I am at 18 years old, sitting in the county jail. And I ended up getting 2 years, 2 years in Florida State prison at that time.
That must have been rough.
Yeah. What's crazy is, so I went to prison twice. I went back when I was 22. That was more rough than the 18-year-old, because the 18-year-old me, man, it was as crazy as it sounds. I was still like, you can't touch me. That was my thought. I was like, big deal. You sent me to prison. Okay. I'm going to hang out here. And it was like tough. I was still a young kid in my mind. So like, yeah, like I miss being home. But like, I just got accustomed to living in prison. And as crazy as it sounds, I was just like, okay, this is just something I have to do, kill the time. At least I'm going home one day. And I would just play basketball, work out. And as crazy as it sounds, like I look back at that time and like, I don't remember how hard it was for me, as nuts as that sounds. Like they would let you, I don't know if they have it in New Jersey, but here, guys who are in prison who are minimum security, they're not like a threat to society. They let them go work in society with a guard, and they're cleaning up the highways and stuff like that. So I had a job like that where I was going into the community, cleaning up the highways and cleaning the cemeteries in the city and stuff. And when I got out, but I will tell you, I got out and I told myself, okay, let's just chill on the drugs. I didn't think I needed to be like completely sober though. I just thought, let me just do this on the weekend. Like there is no more like taking pills. I'm just going to drink, smoke weed, and like just be normal, like not crazy. Cause I had friends who did that and I wanted to be just like them. I don't know about you, man, but I sought out to not be the guy who can't drink and smoke weed, because I looked at other people who I was like, well, that guy drinks and he smokes weed. He's successful. And I wanted to be like him, or the guy who could drink on Saturday and he just goes to church on Sunday. He doesn't have a problem. Like, oh, I can be like that. And I tried to be like those people who occasionally drinks, those moderate people who could drink and put it down. So when I came home, that's what I did. I tried that. I enrolled in college to try to go through it. And as crazy as it sounds, I don't even know how it happened, but eventually I'm buying drugs and I'm drinking again. And really it was because I didn't tell myself I wasn't. So when somebody invited me to a party, I went out and I drank, and I would try to prove to myself, you know what I mean? I would try to say, I'm going to drink on Saturday and I'm not going to drink on Sunday, so I don't have to be that guy. And I would do it to prove to myself. But then eventually I would say, okay, cool, I can do that. Now I can drink on Saturday and Sunday. Well, now we can drink on Monday too, and Tuesday. And now we can smoke weed. And eventually I'm picking up opiates again. I'm going back to the thing that I know. And the reason is because I never dealt with myself. I was masking how I felt. I was masking my feelings. I was masking my fears with getting distractions, with going to school and getting a job. And you see that in recovery now, right? Somebody comes into the program, they get a couple weeks under their belt, they start to feel a little bit better. The fog is lifted from the drugs. They never do the work on the inside. So they start getting a job and getting a girlfriend or a boyfriend and thinking like, okay, life is good. I got it now. I got it. And that's what happened to me. I thought I had it. And then it, as they say, the disease progresses. Man, it was like within a week, I'm dropping out of school again. Within a month, my parents are like, you can't stay at our house anymore because you stole from me. You stole from my dad's business. So I'm sleeping in my car at this point. And then at the age, so I got out of prison when I was right before my 21st birthday. I went back to prison right before I turned 23 on a bunch of charges. I caught probation in between, and then on probation, I violate. And this time I go to prison for 3 years and 2 years probation. And in prison, you would think I stayed sober, but anybody who knows, there's a lot of drugs in prison. So I didn't. You know, I found another excuse to say I got nothing but time. And I got high every day until January 23rd, 2016. My sobriety date's the 24th. They sent me to a work release program where when you're in prison, if you're not getting in trouble, which I just didn't get caught for the trouble I was doing, they let you go work in community with an ankle bracelet. So it's pretty much like you're on house arrest, but you're going to live in a halfway house. And they sent me back on January 23rd, and I sat in a 10 by 10 cell. And I remember just thinking at that moment, for the first time in my life, I don't know if I know how to stay sober. And that's what it took. It took me to say, I knew if I got out of that 10 by 10 cell, I knew I would want to go get drugs and probably do it. But I knew I didn't want to. Like, it was such a weird thing that I didn't understand. And it was the understanding that I'm powerless. That was the first time I realized I was powerless. And all I did was I got on my knees and I prayed. I prayed and I cried like a baby. It was the first time I think I was honest with myself to say, hey, I got a problem. I don't even know how to, I think I threw my pride and my ego aside. And I said, you don't know nothing. You're scared. And I had to reach out a hand for help. So when I got out of that 10 by 10 cell, I stayed in prison for another 4 months to finish my sentence. And the first day I came home, I reached out to somebody in the program of recovery and was like, hey, dude, I'm scared out of my mind. I know if I get high again, I'm going back to prison or I'm going to die. And I don't want that. Can you help me? And that's what it took for me to actually come and start my journey of recovery.
So let's talk about that. What was so you realized you were powerless. What was the next step after that? What did you do?
I turned my will over to care of God as I understood him. You know, one thing is even today, man, I love to take my will back. I love to run the show. You know, if everybody would just do what I want them to do. And it's crazy because as I started the program and I would talk to my sponsor at the time and we're going through these steps, I never realized how much I wanted to run the show. I wanted to be in control of my life. And once I realized that I am not in control of my life anymore, it was scary, but it was also like a weight lifted. Like if something happens in my life, it's not because of me. It has nothing to do with me. I use the analogy. It's like being in a rowboat with God. I row and I let God steer. And for me, it wasn't hard to turn my life over to a care of God as I understood him because I knew there was a higher power. I knew there was a God. And the reality was I was scared of running my own life. If you look at my life on my will, I mean, from 14 to 26, all you see is damage. All you see is hurt. All you see is no guidance. There's a bunch of pain. I'm just a wrecking ball. So why would I want to control my life anymore? And I've always tried to. I tried to not do drugs. I tried to maybe go to school, drink on the week. I've tried every way to run the show, and it didn't work for me. And I'll be honest with you, man, I was so scared. For the first time in my life, I remember saying it, like, I respect drugs and alcohol. I got so much respect for it because that thing is powerful. And like, I don't even want to mess with it. It's like getting in a fight with a guy who's 400 pounds. Like, imagine you got to box Canelo or you got to get in a boxing ring with Conor McGregor. You're almost like, dude, I don't want to fight you. You know, and that's what I had to do. I had to turn my will over to God and say, okay, God, I'm giving my life to you and let you orchestrate my life. I'm going to row, but anything that happens in my life, it's because of you. You're pretty much connecting the dots in my life, put people in my life to get me out of myself, you know, and that's where I start to turn the will over, you know. So I just had to make a decision. And then my next thing I had to do was just turn my will over to God as I understand him.
How did your inventory come along?
So it's crazy about my inventory, man, is when I started on the 4-step, I remember my sponsor talked to me and he said, hey, anybody who you feel when you think of their name makes you angry. And I remember thinking, well, look, I'm more angry at myself. than I am at anybody else. Because everybody that kind of pissed me off, like a boss that fired me, or the girlfriend that dumped me, or my dad for kicking me out, like I deserved it. You know, like I don't even know if I'm mad at them. And I remember treating it like it was homework instead of reflection. So I had a hard time actually. Like I just put myself on there first because I had a hard time really understanding, like, am I really angry at people? And it took through some prayer. It took me actually reading through, like I read through the 12 and 12 to help me really understand what a resentment is. So it actually took me to process my thoughts. And then all of a sudden, and this goes to prayer too, like my sponsor would tell me, hey, pray about it. Ask God to show you these things. So I started to, like, the first person I put down was my dad. And then I started realizing, like, there is some people that I have blamed for why I am where I am. The guy who introduced me to drugs, my dad for moving me to Florida. I blame the girl who told me that I wanted to get sober one time. And I said, let's go to treatment. And she was like, no, let's not go to treatment. I can find a way. We'll get sober together. And I listened to her. So I blamed her for why I never went. And then I started realizing, like, wow, I don't even understand how I was doing this stuff until I slowed down to reflect. So when I did the inventory, it definitely made me slow down to understand. The best part of it when you get to see your part, you know, because some of the stuff, it was hard for me to see my part. It was hard for me to see, you know, what's my part in my dad moving me here? Like that has nothing to do with me. But how I reacted was definitely my part. You know, how I maybe could have opened the door and had a conversation with my dad. Just because he didn't talk to me, I could have talked to him. You know, so there's a lot of things I could have done differently, which that's the way people need to live their lives. Is when you're mad at somebody, the best thing to do is look at yourself. But we don't want to do that because we want to blame them. And that goes back to me running the show. You know, I want to be the guy who, if you do this, you do that, you do this, my life will be better. So the one thing that was important for me on my inventory, though, is when I met with my sponsor, we sat down to do the inventory. And I do this with all the guys that I work with. He said, Joseph, before we sit here and go over this, I need to ask you a question. Is there anybody that's on here that you didn't put down that we need to talk about? Because if there is, and you're not talking about it, and you could think of somebody, that's the reason you're going to go back out. I promise you, like, you'll leave here today and it's going to be the one thing that it's either going to eat at you and you're going to go back out tomorrow, or you will go back out. I promise you, if you don't be honest and open about that. And as soon as he said it, I knew it was when I was molested, when I was 6 years old. I didn't put that person down on paper because I didn't want to talk about it, because I've never talked about it before. And I said it. And I remember, like, yeah, there's somebody. He's like, who is it? And I paused and he's like, hey, there ain't no judgment here, bro. If you want to stay sober, like, just get it out of your mouth. Like, that's the reality of it, is being 100% honest and not caring about what I'm going to think, what I'm going to feel. So I shared it with him and I told him for the first time, I've never talked to anybody about it. But what's crazy, what happened was we talked about it for about 15, 20 minutes. We got emotional. I was in tears. He actually shared with me that this happened to him before and how he worked around it and how he dealt with it. And dude, after, I feel like that was the first time in my life the lights turned on. That was the first time in my life that I felt like I almost relieved that weight. Now, it wasn't like I left that meeting feeling like, oh my God, this is great. Like, no, there was still this, like, I was still kind of judging myself a little bit. I was still, you know, feeling a little bit of weight, but that massive weight that was on me over my life, it felt a little bit lighter, you know. And then he would tell me, like, hey, if we keep doing these things, you're going to keep feeling lighter and lighter and lighter. And then one day you're going to feel heavy again, because there's going to be something. We're going to keep getting light. We're just going to keep stripping down that weight, you know. So that was pretty much the my sponsor. We went right into it, man. We didn't waste any time. It was, let's sit down, let's go through it. We spent like 3 hours on the inventory list.
Yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah, there was a lot there.
Yeah. So what did you do? What kind of things were you doing to maintain your sobriety once you got it?
So my first year, it was like my life. And I wish I would say like all 5 years it was my life, but man, my first year, it became my life. Because what happened for me, man, is I've tried so many other ways. Like, I've been in and out, and I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. So like, whatever my sponsor told me to do, I almost just listened for the first time in my life. Like, I remember I worked a job and I hated the job. It affected my schedule. It affected everything. There was pessimism around there. Everybody was smoking weed. And I would constantly, like, complain to my sponsor about it. He's like, just stay, do your part, keep looking for another job, trust God, clean house, and help others. Like, you're still stuck in yourself. And so right away, man, like the first year, whatever he told me to do. So I was like, well, how am I stuck in myself? What am I supposed to do? He said, well, what are you doing for other people? Are you picking up any commitments? You helping other guys? I was like, bro, I'm 60 days sober. Who can I help? He said, you can help the guy who's 10 days sober. You can pour some coffee at a meeting. You can hold the door at a meeting. You can get there early, and ask people if they need some help. Like, that's like, it's crazy as I was like a baby. Like, I don't know this stuff. I'm so selfish. I'm not used to helping people because I got nothing to give. That's what I always thought. I got nothing to give. That was always my answer when he wanted me to help. I was like, bro, I got nothing to give. And he's like, trust me, you always have something to give. I don't care if you got a day sober. You can hold the door for somebody. You can clean up afterwards. We're going to erase that I got nothing to give to I always have something to give. So it was meetings. I want to say it was meetings every day. Because looking back, I think there was times where one thing my sponsor said was, look, it's not just about the meetings. It's about doing something for your recovery every day. So like, if you can put in your schedule to make a meeting every day, that's what I want you to do. But if you're not going to a meeting at 7:00 because you're meeting with me, you're doing something to your recovery, and that's fine. So, and that was the way he sponsored me, was every day I needed to do something to my recovery. I had to wake up every day, which was one of the hardest things, and stay focused on, because he would ask me to call him before I leave the house, and I would, and he'd be like, hey, did you say your prayers yet? I was like, no, I was going to say my prayers in the car. He said, dude, I need you to talk to God, give up your will today, and ask God to put somebody in your life that you can help. And it just became a habit. So it would be starting my day with prayers, getting into work. And the one thing that was important that I always told people that I did well, because I was so afraid, was anytime I started to get upset, get angry, questioning my thoughts, or have a decision to make, I would call somebody, which was hard, but it was like I almost had to learn how to deal with life, because we don't know how to deal with life when we're like, the reality is this: I'm running from Joseph my whole life, so I take drugs. Well, now Joseph doesn't have drugs and he's stuck with himself. So I'm like, am I making the right decision? Am I not? Like, I always question so much stuff early on. Hey, should I sponsor this guy? He wants me to sponsor him. Hey, should I do this? Should I do that? But the fear of going back out is what pushed me to every time, just like when I didn't want to call my sponsor to complain again about my job. Like, I remember the first maybe 60 days I had a job that I completely hated. I was talked down to. They always told me, you're lucky we gave you a job as a felon. And I just felt like I shouldn't work there. But what's crazy is, thank God I didn't do my will, because 2 days before I got a new job, I met my wife, who's currently my wife today. So if I would have been on Joseph's will, I would have lost the most amazing woman that God had in my life. And that's what I learned when, you don't realize it when you're in the situation, but what happens is, if you're going to let God run your life, sometimes you're going through something that you're not happy with. And sometimes it's God trying to get your attention, or it's God doing something for you that you're trying to do something different, and we don't realize it when we're in it. So there's so many moments that happened in the first year of my recovery that every single time I wanted to do something different, but God was like, nope, I got you right where I want you. Stay right here. And I'm like, but God, and that's me taking my will back. So my first year in recovery, it was all about learning about me. I created a fellowship around me. I had a huge brotherhood. I found one of the most amazing men's meetings. I always encourage people to go to a men's meeting, get a bunch of men around you, so you can relate. Because I mean, young in recovery, everybody's always looking for a girl, or if you're a girl, listen to this, you're looking for a guy. Well, us men, we can relate. We can get together. We can get real with each other. There's no bias. There's no like, oh man, are you talking to me because you're trying to hook up with me or something like that? So that was important. I got a men's meeting. I got a home group. I always talk to my sponsor. We just got, the most important thing is, man, within like, I want to say about 90 days, I was done with the steps. And then it was just reliving the steps. Like, something came up again, a resentment came up. And then I started going to treatment centers. I'd go to a halfway house once a week, and I'd speak to the guys. I'd pick up sponsorship. It just became my life. Like, I scheduled my life around my recovery. It was like, oh, I can't do that on Thursday night. That's where I'm going here. And it was almost as important as, like, if you're a diabetic and you have to go get dialysis, you can't reschedule your dialysis appointment. You have to do it. And my sponsor constantly told me, like, dude, the enemy in your addiction is out there doing push-ups. If you're not going to put some stuff in your life where when your enemy comes over to try to take you down, you got armor up and you're ready to fight. But as soon as you stop doing the things you're supposed to do, the enemy's going to come lurking because you're weak. So I did that really well in my first year. And I say that because year 2 and 3, I kind of got complacent a little bit. Like, okay, you know what? I can get rid of this commitment. I can get rid of that commitment. I can get rid of this commitment. I don't have to go to meetings every day. I don't have to do this. Like, I'm starting to get busy with, like, life got in the way. And then I found Joseph thinking the same old thoughts he used to think, except I'm not using drugs at this time. I started blaming other people. I started being a victim again. I started getting irritable and discontent. And thank God that I still had friends in recovery who would constantly try to pull me back in. And what they would do is they would just say, "Hey, bro, you need to, like, at least come to a meeting." You know what I mean? Like, I know COVID is here and all this, but, like, they're doing meetings. Like, you haven't been around in a minute. Like, so I came right back in. And then at the first meeting I came to, I was like, oh my God, like, I got emotional. I was like, I can't believe I haven't, like, I missed it. You know, I didn't realize how much I missed that fellowship, how much I missed that. Like, it was my people. These are my people. And I haven't seen them in so long. And then I got right back in and started moving forward again.
That's great, man. So what type of stuff you doing nowadays? How's life nowadays with the family and work and all that? How's sobriety treating you?
Well, the reality is life is still happening. I'm just reacting to problems differently. That's how sobriety, like, I laugh because I'm like, man, AA's messed us up because, I'm AA is the program that I'm in, but recovery or doing the steps, whatever. I say it messed us up because, like, anytime something happens in our life, we can't, like, start blaming like, it's just like I'm programmed now, that I can't blame the situations. I'm like, no, that's just life. I can't blame somebody, stealing from me. I'm like, they didn't steal from me. They just stole. I'm taking things personal. It's not about you. I'm programmed to think that way, and that I'm actually grateful for that. If you would have took me back 6 years ago and told me that I'm gonna have the life that I have today, I would have, like, laughed. I'd be like, "There's no way. There's no way that this guy could have this life." So my life today, I mean, I'm married. My wife, we have 5 kids all together. So she had 3 kids from a previous marriage, and we have 2 together. I'm a business owner. I got 16 employees that I pretty much operate. It's a 7-figure fence company here in Jacksonville, which is another, like, crazy thing. Like, even when I say it, I'm like, I don't even get it. But God is constantly doing for me, man, what I can't do for myself. It's really the truth of my life today. It's not a testament of me, because, like, I dropped out in ninth grade. I shouldn't have what I have. Like, sometimes I'm like, man, it's crazy that I have what I have. Like, yes, I work hard. Yes, I hustle. Yes, I lead. Yes, I do that. But, like, man, there's God all over my story. And I couldn't say this story without saying that, because people will look at me, or people will look at you, or they'll hear stories and, like, that's you. I'm like, no, 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 that's God using somebody, and God wants to use you too. And all I've done was constantly give my will back to him and say, okay, I didn't know nothing about fence, man. I knew nothing about fence. Like, I worked for a fence company for 6 months, and I started putting up fence for, like, on the side and just figuring it out. And somehow God took that guy to running a 16 employee business with doing 7 figures in less than 4 years. Like, that's nuts. That's not me. Like, if people hear that, I'm like, dude, it's just God putting pieces together. Like, I put in work, but God put pieces together. So today I do, like, the business is almost operating itself. We actually just got rid of, like, one of my assistants, so I'm rehiring somebody there. So dealing with that kind of stuff. Obviously with 5 kids, there's struggles all over the place. We got teenagers, we got babies, so there's problems everywhere. My character defects are constantly popping up. But every day, man, I want to look in the mirror. Like, when I'm feeling bothered by something that's going on in the house or in my marriage, I'm just constantly looking at myself, because the reality is, like, if I'm going to get mad at my wife for responding a certain way, I can't change her. And now I'm focused on something I can't change. And now I'm going back down that road. I'm always afraid of that. Like, we were joking before we got on here, people call me Joseph, and the old me was Joe. I was always
Mm.
known by Joe. And the reality is, I know Joe still wants to come back. Like, I always feel like Joe's trying to fight Joseph to come back. And then there's some things, like, and he comes back through my defects. So when I start getting angry and blaming people, I laugh, and I'm like, that's Joe trying to come back. Okay, Joe, let me look at why you're trying to come back. Oh, you're coming back because I was being selfish when my wife asked me to clean the dishes when I was watching football, and all I cared about was me. And I got upset at her, which some people be like, man, it's almost like you're putting yourself down. I'm like, no, no, no. I'm always getting better. I'm always realizing in ways in my life that I can get better. I don't want to be a 7-figure business owner, but a $10 husband. I don't want to be a 7-figure business owner, but a $10 father, or even a 7-figure business owner and a $10 man in recovery. And right now, where I'm at in my life, my business is operating itself. So thankfully, financially, it can be there. So I'm trying to, like, husband and father is what I am first. But right now, the journey that I'm on, which is let's get real, is talking about the stuff that you and I are talking about, man. I want to give people a platform. Nowadays, in recovery, it's so easy for us to get real. Like when we come in, because like we're scared, we're facing death sometimes, we're facing like something very traumatic where if we don't get real, we go back out, that could either lead us to jail or death. But how many people in the world today are dealing with something similar to an addiction, but they're not treating it like it's their life? They're afraid to have real conversations. They're afraid to say, "Hey, bro, I'm struggling in my marriage. Can I talk to you about something I'm going through?" Or, "Hey, I'm a father and I'm struggling with my son." Like, because right, especially with men, like we don't want to talk about this stuff. We don't want to talk about the things that we're going through. Because why? We want to act like everything's okay. We want to act like, man, everything's fine. Who's gonna listen to me? I don't want to complain about my stuff. And I don't need to talk about it. Everything's good. Everything's good. Yeah. How are you doing, bro? I'm good. I'm good. And I want people to just get real. So I always say I'm vulnerable, to give people permission to be vulnerable to me as well. And right now, the journey I'm on is I'm working with guys in recovery. I'm working with guys coming out of prisons. I'm currently going back into the prisons. It was funny. I went the other day to get fingerprinted at the same place that I was shackled in, and that was a trip. So just doing those things, I'm trying to help people in the way that I've overcome, because I'm still selfish and self-centered. And the truth is every day, if I'm not doing something for other people, I'm just stuck in myself, and I hate it. I hate being stuck in myself, but I'm always going back to it. As crazy as it sounds, it's like, I hate just thinking about me, because it's like, what good is that doing for me? And then I think that's where depression hits. I think if you ever talk to somebody who's dealing with depression, or who they're sad, or they're saying their life is not great, you're going to hear all the things in their life that they're not happy about themselves, because they're stuck in themselves. But it's hard for me to find somebody who's doing something for other people and constantly just thinking about, how can I help other people? Like, even if you're working a 9 to 5, like, is there something you can do for other people? And if you're focused on helping other people, that's when I feel like you learn to love yourself. And that's the journey I'm on right now. I want to be a living example that anything is possible. There's no excuse. Even felons coming out, they're so afraid of getting a job, because they're like, dude, I can't get a job, or I can't rent a house. I'm like, you're right. Sometimes it's harder for you to find a job. Sometimes it's harder for you to rent a house. But what are we going to do with that now? Like, you want to live in prison the rest of your life? I mean, you can still find a job. I did. You can still find a home. I did. And here's what I did to do it. You just got to put in the work. And that's the mission that I'm on right now, man. I'm like fired up out of my mind talking to people, because I think it's a real thing. I think people don't want to get real. People are hiding behind something. We're in this world of all the external stuff, like, okay, what about the car that I buy, and this that I buy, and that, and I'm always deep, like, okay, why do you want that? My wife was talking to our daughter the other day. This was actually last night. And my daughter said, I want to get all A's in college. But she doesn't know why. Like, why do you want to get all that? Like, I know some people will just end with, I want to get all A's. Well, why do you want to get all A's? Because I want to prove that I'm good enough. Okay, is there other ways you can prove that you're good enough? Or is it just through, like, because the real reason why people want what they want, there's a root to it. I want to be successful. What does success look like? I want to ask more questions behind people's whys. I want to ask more questions behind why people do what they do every day, because that's going to help you become the most authentic version of who you are. So this is just the mission that I'm on, man. Just talking about this stuff. Like, I love getting on podcasts, because my hope is that somebody will reach out to me that hears this. And I mean it. Like, I'm hoping someone will say, bro, I heard what you said, and there's an area in my life I'm struggling with today, that, like, I'm just kind of feeling down on myself, or I'm dealing with marriage issues, or I'm dealing with a son in recovery. I had somebody call me the other day that said they heard a TikTok of mine, and his son just went to jail, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. And we got to talk for 30 minutes for me to just encourage him, give him a different perspective, and show him, like, hey, look, your son's got hope. That's the stuff that I want to do, because that's my new drug. It's my new dope. I'm chasing it like I chase drugs.
So tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast is called Let's Get Real. Sorry, and the main purpose of it is, so about a year ago, man, I said, I wanted to share a message. I knew that I wanted to talk about my story, because I believed God was all over the story. And I used to love, like, when I first got sober, I would listen to podcasts all the time. I would hear people that got out of prison that I could relate to, And I would almost find hope in what they like in their stories. I'm like, oh, that dude was in prison. Oh, that guy was a drug addict. And look, he made like I was looking for some sense of hope. And I was also looking for like another perspective. So about a year ago, I wanted to start a podcast, and one of the things I struggled with was like, what am I going to talk about? I don't have a microphone. I don't know how to do this. So I allowed all my fears to stop me from doing it. Well, eventually I heard something on a podcast where someone was like, if you really want to do something, you just do it and you figure it out along the way. So then, like, if you go back to my podcast, my first episode was my story. I was recording it on AirPods while I was driving in my truck. And I didn't really care so much about the audio. I wasn't thinking so much about who's going to hear it. I just wanted to do it. And then I started talking about topics that was important to me. Well, what I found was I'm just one person. I have one perspective. And what I fell in love with was bringing people on to share their stories, because I love listening to people's stories. And again, like a lot of people might relate to me, but there's some things that maybe somebody would hear my story and that you can only say so much about your story. But I want to bring different people on, different perspectives, different walks of life, where people who have overcome some stuff and got real with themselves, they had to face, maybe it's a childhood demon, maybe they faced their addiction. I had a couple people on here who were victims of human trafficking, who are living a life today and using their past and creating a purpose for it. So that's the mission of Let's Get Real. It's to talk about real life situations, people who are dealing with real stuff, even still now that that people look at maybe me now, they're like, oh, 7 figures, 5 years sober, is great. I'm like, man, I'm dealing with marriage, stuff that we deal with every day, business. I'm still dealing with problems, and this is how I'm overcoming them. So like I want people to see themselves as, what, there's hope. There's somebody out there who is an addict just like me. Maybe you're 30 days sober and you listen to my podcast and you hear somebody who talks about what they did when they were 30 days sober, just to give that little bit of hope, just to give that little bit of inspiration. So that's the purpose of the podcast. I love the conversations too, that you get to meet people that come on there, and then I get to connect with people. People hear it and they send me a message and I get to connect with them. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to build a community, man. I'm trying to build people around the whole Let's Get Real mantra of like, hey, let's sit down and let's talk about what we're really going through. Somebody talked to me the other day and told me he was married. He's dealing with a pornography problem, that he found himself wanting to cheat on his wife now because he's dealing with pornography. And like, it sounds so deep that people don't want to talk about that stuff, but like, this is a real situation this guy's going through. And he was like, I didn't know who to talk to because I was afraid if I brought that up to somebody, they would judge me. But when I heard you talking about the real life stuff and being authentic and being vulnerable, like I figured I might as well reach out. And I was so grateful for that, because I was like, now that's why I do it. I do it because I'm hoping that the thing that you're struggling with today allows you to either open up to me or to somebody so you can create that change in your life, man.
Awesome, man. So yeah, I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people watching and listening?
Yeah, so that question would be tough, but because everybody's in a different walk of life. But to answer the question in context, for anybody listening right now, my biggest message is, what is it that you're going through in your life today? What is it that you're masking that you need to talk to somebody about? I think today in our life right now, we're so busy on the external. We're so busy on chasing something and working towards something, but not knowing why we're chasing it and losing ourselves in the process. I would encourage somebody to begin with the end in mind. I want you to picture yourself. And if you're not driving right now and you're somewhere where you can, I want you to close your eyes and take yourself inside of a church and imagine you are walking into a church. Everybody's dressed in black. It's a funeral. You walk up to the front. It's a casket. You are there. You are in your casket. You only get one life. One day you're going to be either in a casket, in an urn, wherever. It's going to happen. What do you want people to say about you when you die? This is the stuff you need to focus on, because we get so lost in working towards our goals, working towards making money, I got to get married. I got to get a job. I got to get a degree. All the stuff that you're working towards. The last thing I ever want anybody to do is lose themselves. You can still work towards those things. It's not a bad thing, but who do you become in the process of that? And begin with the end in mind is so important, because like for me, for example, if my wife were to speak, I want her to say, I provided for my family. I was supportive of her and her decisions. I was a good father, that I loved her every single day, that I admired her. So guess what I get to do? I get to focus on that every day. When I'm home, I'm literally living an intentional life focused on being that husband. business owners, same thing. I mean, in every walk of life, you can still chase the goals you want, but who do you want to become in the process? This is what I would encourage you to do. Maybe write it down on a piece of paper. If you're a video, you want notes, whatever you can do to write that down, who you want to become. And every day, just focus on being that person and watch how you'll actually get the goals quicker because you're not losing yourself in it. You're becoming yourself and then chase your dreams and goals. So that's the one piece of advice that I would give to people today.
It's pretty good advice.
It helped me, man. It changed my life.
Yeah, seems like you're doing good, man. Glad that you're doing so well.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm doing good. I'm blessed, bro. That's the reality of it. I have a different perspective on my life today. I still deal with stuff. I'm sober. I'm sober minded. My problems are just different problems today, and I just react to them differently. I'm still dealing with life. It's not like life is not coming to me. We still got so many things in our lives that we got to face. But today, I'm facing them with an authentic individual. I'm not blaming people. Not all the time. I have to get called out on it. I'm hard headed. But I have some tools in my life that just allow me to say, hey, how can I look at this different? How can I not create more damage in my life? And then just continue to move forward.
So, did you have anything else you want to throw in?
No, the last thing I'd say, man, if people want to connect with me, they can connect with me on social media platforms. It's Joseph Kajy, Kajy. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. And when I say connect with me, I don't mean just like follow me. Like for sure, follow me, check out the stuff that I post on there. But I would love to connect with you in my messages. If you relate to something and shoot me a message, I 100% respond to everybody. And there's times I start creating Zoom calls to talking to people. So that's what I'd like. If somebody heard something today that says, Joseph, I want to talk with you. There's some things that I feel comfortable. Like I'll chat with you since I don't know you. Like I'm hoping you do that. I'm hoping that's the purpose and that's what comes out of today.
I really appreciate you doing this today. I think it's been a great interview. How do you feel?
Dude, I feel like I'm leaving a meeting. I'm fired up. I'm rejuvenated. Like I'm ready to talk to some people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I like doing this. Like I said, like we were talking about earlier, this is pretty much like a speaker meeting, but you're just reaching hopefully a wider audience.
Yeah, yeah. And I appreciate you for creating the platform, man. 170 episodes. Dude, it takes a lot of work to do that. So like if somebody's hearing this, dude, and someone's gonna get something from it, whether it's me or you, but you giving that to people today, I admire it, I respect it, man. So thank you for giving me this platform.
Thank you, man. That means a lot. It really does. I'm not gonna lie, I like hearing, that it helps people and shit like that. So it's kind of like, you're being selfish where it makes me feel good, but at the same time, like you said, I'm helping other people. So it's not a bad thing.
That's right. I agree with that 100%.
Yeah. All right, my friend. So sit tight for just a moment. And for everybody watching and listening, if you like what you saw and heard, go below and give us a like. Also, subscribe to see when we upload new videos. You can check us out on Tumblr, Twitter, Reddit, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. I also suggest taking a look at our website, which is www.addicts-anonymous.com. There you will find plenty of resources as well as free literature. So again, I hope you enjoyed today, and until next time.